Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first winter-spring session of the Careers Beyond Academia that Medicine by Design is hosting in partnership with the Stem Cell Network. My name is Stephanie Hume, and I am the Associate Director at Medicine by Design, and I will be the moderator for today's session. And our goal with this series is to expose as many trainees as possible to different job roles that are available after a degree in the life sciences, and to start to understand what qualifications and experiences you might need to undertake these roles. And as I said, we've teamed up with Stem Cell Network to run these sessions, and we have already done a few in the series. So if you're interested to see past sessions, they're on Stem Cell Network's YouTube, which we can link to as well. So I'm pleased today to welcome two speakers for our session focused around industry relations and partnerships. We have Jodi Garner, who's the Strategic Collaborations Lead at Roche, and Patrycja Thompson, who is a Partnerships Officer in the Strategic Initiatives Industry Partnerships group at U of T. And so a few housekeeping notes before we get going with our speakers. The first is that the session is recorded, although we will be stopping the recording after our presentations and before questions. So we encourage lots of discussion after our presentation. Stay from the audience, and rest assured it will not be recorded. Our speakers will each have about 10 to 15 minutes to talk, and that will leave lots of time for questions after the fact. If you are wanting to ask a question, you have two options. You can either put your question into the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. You can ask it live at the end of the two speakers. And so with that, I will introduce our first speaker, Jodi Garner. And so Jodi is a strategic collaborations lead with the Health Data Strategy team at Roche Canada. Jodi leads several internal initiatives focused on upskilling the organization around partnerships and driving operational excellence in this area, while externally building public-private partnerships. Before joining Roche, Jodi worked at the intersection of industry and academia at the Ontario Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Jodi studied biotechnology and has a master's in stem cells and regeneration, with a lifelong passion for bringing innovation science to patients. And with that, I will pass it over to Jodi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Just going to bring up my slides. Hopefully you can see that. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really excited to be at today's session. I have worked closely with both Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design in the past, and I always found these types of events really enlightening and experience, really to just broaden your understanding of what's going on in the ecosystem. So I'm really excited today to kind of share my career path and get everybody else excited for opportunities in strategic collaborations and partnership space. So, as I said, my current position is Strategic Collaborations Lead, and I work for Roche Canada. So some of you may be familiar with Roche as an organization. There's kind of two different parts of Roche. One is the diagnostics division, which may be more familiar to you in the kind of the lab, supporting kind of like qPCR machines, those types of analytics. And then I work in the pharmaceutical side of it, so in the space that develops and delivers molecules to support patients. As was mentioned kind of in my quick intro, my kind of background and degrees to now is I have my master's in stem cells and regeneration from the University of Bristol, and then I also have an advanced diploma in biotechnology from Seneca College. So here's kind of my career timeline, and I will apologize, it is quite busy, but there is a reason why I want to kind of add all these boxes onto the slide. So at the top, you'll see that's kind of I would say my real jobs, the things that paid the bills. And then at the bottom is kind of some of the different activities that I did throughout my career to help me kind of explore the areas that I was potentially interested in finding a career in. So as I kind of started did my biotechnology diploma at Seneca College, and then I got a role with Anapharm, which is a CRO, and supporting clinical trials in kind of new investigative spaces. Worked there for a few years, and a lot of it was kind of dealing with patients, taking blood, monitoring them for food intake, those types of things. And I really felt like I was too far away from the lab. So after working there for a couple of years, I kind of wanted to switch over and went back to a lab-based role at SickKids, and started off at SickKids as a technician, and was there for about 10 years and worked in various different roles, starting off as a technician, then going into a project manager, And then eventually also going into kind of a project lead and then being the lab manager for the research lab that I worked in. So during my entire time that I was at Sick Kids, I worked in the lab of Dr. Janet Rawson. And I had kind of two different roles here. One was in her lab, kind of as a researcher, helping to support the day-to-day research elements of the group. But then I also established and ran the stem cell facility. So this was a core facility at Sick Kids that was kind of an internal business unit that would help support anybody who was looking to do stem cells or regenerative medicine work within Sick Kids. So we would help with optimizing reagents, optimizing protocols, working with various investigators within the institution who are interested in starting research within the stem cell space. So we would kind of work as kind of internal consultants, helping them figure out what the practicalities of implementing those protocols would be. And that was kind of my first, I'd say, interest into kind of the business side of science. So I kind of did those two roles in parallel while I was at Sick Kids, and then was looking to kind of take the leap out of the lab. And I moved on to the Ontario Institute for Regenerative Medicine in 2016, where I was initially hired as a senior manager of science and operations, helping to kind of set up their operational elements of the organization since it was in startup stage. And then after about a year as in that role, moved over to science and industry relations. And within this role, it was kind of running the grant programs, doing a lot of the knowledge and translation events, such as this type of event for the ecosystem, and then also set up our industry partnership program. So looking to see how we could partner with industry to bring an investment to the regenerative medicine community within Ontario. After doing that for a few years, I was looking to kind of see the other side of the industry. So I kind of worked in the not-for-profit space, kind of worked in the semi-government space, and then I wanted to kind of go over and see what industry was like. So I took this role as strategic collaborations lead in 2019 at Roche Canada. And then you kind of see those bottom many little arrows. And this is really, I would say, my journey is I never knew what I wanted to do. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. So this is kind of a lot of time I spent kind of trying different types of careers that may be of interest to me. So for example, I was interested in teaching. So I did do a stint teaching at Seneca in pharmaceutical microbiology, realized teaching was not for me. I was also interested in kind of venture capital space. So I did do a little project doing kind of some scientific due diligence with Bloom Burton. And then kind of as I was interested in maybe more going into this clinical space, more recently did some volunteer work as a steering committee member with St. Michael's Hospital, and a few other kind of different things I did throughout kind of that 10-year period, really to just explore what other career opportunities existed out there. So in my current role, it's kind of at a quick glance, it's a relatively new role within the organization and specific to Roche Canada. So this role does not exist in most pharma companies, and it doesn't exist in a lot of even the other Roche affiliates. And it's really was created because about 4 years ago, Roche made a shift where they really wanted to focus on developing partnership activities. So in order to kind of make that internal shift and put a higher emphasis on partnerships, they created this strategic collaborations role, really to kind of develop and upskill the organization around partnerships and start to develop some of our partnership activities. So for this, I would say the typical degree is kind of a degree in life sciences with about 10 years progressive experience. The salary range is about 85 to 150K based on experience level. And what I would say I do on a day-to-day basis is it's a lot of connecting the dots internally and externally to build and identify partnerships. So this is trying to work with our internal stakeholders to say, what are the areas that we strategically want to partner on, going out to the external environment, figuring out who are those external partners that we can work with on these projects, and then bringing it back internally to say, how can we make sure that we're developing this partnership in a way that's compliant and sustainable? So we obviously, as a highly regulated pharma industry, we have to make sure whatever we're doing is compliant within the guardrails of what we can do. And then eventually we also want to make sure that it is sustainable. It's something that's going to be taken up by the healthcare system. So those are kind of the day-to-day conversations that I'm having. It's a lot of that kind of connecting the dots, jack of all trade, master of none, but really knowing the right people to bring together. And I would say the kind of key skills I use on a day-to-day basis is a lot of communication, project management, the operational excellence, which really comes to that compliance and sustainability aspect of it. Active listening, this comes from listening to what's going on in the industry. What are the industry trends? How can we engage those stakeholders and then bring innovation and coaching into our conversations? And as I showed on kind of the previous slide, when I considered what else I could do, I considered everything. I really never had one specific kind of career path. I didn't think I would end up in partnerships. It just happened to really spark my interest when I saw the job posting. And that's why I kind of ended up in this role. So I'd say my typical activities on a day-to-day basis can kind of be put into three main buckets. The first one is developing our business operations around partnerships. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, we just kind of made this transition about 3-4 years ago into really focusing on partnership activities. And in order for us to kind of get our internal business up to speed in that, it was a lot of kind of developing the internal business and compliance processes. This is everything from systems changes. How are we actually going to implement this within the organization? How do we make sure that everyone that's engaging with stakeholders is properly trained, knows how to engage in these conversations with our partners, but also knows kind of the compliance and guardrails in which we need to work within. So a lot of that is kind of systems. It's more of the kind of the process elements of how we partner. The second bucket where I probably spend the majority of my time is kind of being an internal consultant for all of our therapeutic area teams to help them think through their partnership activities and explore other funding opportunities. So this, how kind of Roche Canada is divided is we have therapeutic areas. So we'll have, for example, like an ophthalmology team that focuses on everything with ophthalmology. We'll have a breast cancer team. And what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll work directly with those teams, depending on where they're looking to partner, help them kind of think through some of the partnership requests they would have gotten, think through where is that strategic overlap within our organization, and then helping them to develop kind of the tools and resources to execute those partnerships. So whether that may be project management tools, whether that may be thinking through what data sharing would look like, all the kind of elements of a partnership, I would work with the teams to help them kind of develop that partnership overview. And then kind of the third bucket is the actual partnerships themselves that I'm actively involved with as the primary lead. So I lead about 6 of our different partnership activities with external environment, and that's everything from contract negotiations, doing the project management, stakeholder relations, all the pieces that kind of go along with establishing and executing on a partnership activity. I think why my job is important is to bring the holistic lens from partnering, right from the kind of the strategy to the operations. So it flexes right through to the, should we do it? Is it strategically aligned? But then also, how can we do it? So what does it actually look like to implement it? And what are the considerations we need to think about? It's also a lot of connecting the dots because we work in kind of therapeutic area buckets. There's not always necessarily that crosstalk between initiatives. So a lot of, I think what my role is to connect those dots between those conversations. We are a very large organization. So because I kind of have my hands in lots of the little conversations, I'm able to hear where there's areas where we could leverage technologies between different therapeutic areas or build things that are across all neuroscience as opposed to just looking at them within one specific therapeutic context. What I really enjoy about my role is every day is different and the team is amazing. I get to work with a lot of really amazing people, both internally as well as externally. And it's also been really great to see the impact that we're having on patients, and that's both locally as well as globally. So because it is kind of later stage phase 3 clinical trials, it's engaging directly with the healthcare system. A lot of the projects that I'm helping to support, you can start to see that immediate impact on patients' lives within kind of a few months to a year of implementing the project. There's also a lot of opportunities to work on projects of my own personal interest, which I've really enjoyed because I am across multiple therapeutic areas and I am involved in various different conversations. If there is projects that I'm personally very passionate about, I've been able to take on more of an active role in those, whereas other ones I may be more of a kind of consult, but less involved in the day-to-day. So I really have that flexibility to be involved as much or as little as kind of my personal interest in that project is. I would say some of the challenges associated with my role is it was a new role created within the organization. And I think they loosely knew what they wanted us to do, but it wasn't really well defined, which was kind of exciting because it gave me the opportunity to build it in a way that I wanted, but that also had some challenges of sometimes not really knowing where you fit, what you're expected to do. So it is a little bit of a learning curve to kind of figure out how best I could support the organization. And I would say the other challenges is it's a very large organization. So there's lots of moving pieces. There's, the diagnostic side of it. There's the pharma side of it. There's local affiliates. There's global affiliates. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and you have to consider how a project or a partnership is going to impact all the different stakeholders that we're working with. And I would say kind of growth roles within this current role and kind of where you could go next with a type of career like this would be working kind of in partnerships offices, either within other pharma companies, but also in kind of the not-for-profit space or academic institutions. A lot of it goes back to business development. So anything within the business development, venture capital space, a lot of consulting work, and then kind of that operational excellence piece as well from like an operations perspective. How do you actually move these types of projects forward? From a career advice perspective, I would say these would be my themes that I've learned the most along the way. Network, network, network. Your network is going to be huge in figuring out not only what careers exist, but also to helping you kind of get your resume in front of the right people, getting your name out there, being able to kind of show up and be able to engage in conversations and knowing what's going on. And a lot of that in my experiences came from my network. Explore your passions and interests until you know what you like. As you can see, I've tried a lot of things. A lot of them I liked, a lot of them I didn't like. And I wouldn't have kind of known that I enjoyed this partnership space unless I had tried out a lot of those other things. When I first kind of thought about what I wanted to do, I thought it was going to be a very linear path. And then I realized that, that linear path was maybe not what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. So I really wanted to kind of explore different areas and then see what was interesting, what wasn't. There's also a lot of project people and stakeholder management. I would say a lot of people have great ideas and a lot of people are really systems process oriented. It's really hard to pull those two pieces together. So that's where I think that project stakeholder management really comes in to both be innovative and creative in our projects, but then also the reality of how do we actually move them forward? How do we actually align on what we're trying to do? There's also a key knowledge of kind of understanding the industry trends. We want to obviously partner in spaces that are the most innovative, up and coming, and that comes from knowing what the ecosystem's looking for. Obviously, my role is strategic collaborations lead, so being collaborative is key to that, and that's collaborating both internally as well as externally. And then the last thing I think is, don't be afraid to ask tough questions, especially coming new to industry. There was a lot of things that I didn't know about working in pharma, and it kind of challenged us to think about ways that we could do things differently because I didn't have that experience. So sometimes it's, don't be afraid to ask tough questions, but then also don't just ask questions without solutions. So I've always tried to, whenever I'm presenting kind of challenges or questions, think about what potential solutions could be. And I think that can kind of make for a really good starting point of it's not just we can't do it, but how can we do it? And that shifts the conversation quite nicely. And then I would say kind of in summary, my last two points here is, there's not always one path. So I think a lot of people, when they think about getting into pharma specifically, they think it's usually through an MSL role. But there's lots of other opportunities to get into pharma if you are interested in it. As I said, I didn't even know a career as being a strategic collaborations lead even existed. So it wasn't something I would have pursued out if it wouldn't have been built into my trajectory because I just didn't even know there was a career in that. So kind of explore, think about things from different lenses. I sit within the health data strategy team. So a lot of my team is like epidemiologists, for example. So there's a lot of ways you can get into pharma, not just through your MSL pathway. And then kind of my last one is just don't underestimate yourself. Job postings are wish lists. I've never been qualified for any job I've ever gotten. I think my current role, they asked for like an MD and a PhD. I don't have that, but I still put my hat in the ring. I still applied. And I'm really glad I did because through that interview process, I was able to kind of highlight, I may not have those certain criteria, but I bring so many other things to the table. So I think a lot of people don't apply for jobs that they are really interested in because they may not have everything on the job posting. So I would say, don't underestimate yourself. Apply. What's the worst that can happen? You don't get the job. but at least you kind of learn something about yourself along the way. So that would be kind of the two pieces I wish I would have known, is explore different ways and just apply. You never know where it will go. And with that, I will stop and pass it over to Patrycja.
Thank you very much, Jodi. Thank you for sharing your story. And I think you have a lot of great advice in there for our participants here today. And I'll just, as a reminder, is that we'll be taking questions after our next speaker. So put your questions either in the Q&A. I see there's a couple in there already, or you can raise your hand and ask it live at the end of the two talks. And so with that, I will introduce our next speaker, who is Patrycja, and she is the Partnerships Officer at the University of Toronto in Institutional Strategic Initiatives Office, which is in the division of the Vice President of Research and Innovation. There she leads and supports strategic partnership building with the private sector stakeholders to support a number of the university's multi-divisional strategic research initiatives across all sectors. Prior to joining the ISI portfolio, she was the manager of technology sourcing and evaluation at CCRM, leading diligence on novel academic discoveries, developing commercialization strategies for regenerative medicine therapies, and building stakeholder networks to support venture creation. She completed her PhD in the Department of Immunology at U of T and a Master's in Science and a Bachelor's of Science at the University of Guelph. And with that, I will pass it over to Patrycja.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think this is just a great follow-on from what Jodi was saying, and I very much echo Jodi's last two slides on everything she said, because, and I kind of can touch on it later on, but, you know, we can talk about, you know, definitely, I was always told that actually not to exclude, you know, any men, but women actually suffer very specifically from this, as that they don't really apply for jobs until they fit all the buckets in the job description. And this is something that I was told by other female leaders to really try not to do. And as Jodi said, just put yourself out there and create that visibility on yourself in the ecosystem. Even if you don't get the job, at least you kind of introduce yourself and people know who you are and what you can bring. So I'll start off with, and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to, oh, here we go, okay. So my current position, as Stephanie said, is a partnerships officer in the institutional strategic initiatives office. However, I'm only in this role for the next 2 days because I'm starting a new role as a director of strategy operations for the newly established and yet to be officially announced Canadian Hub for Health Intelligence and Innovation in Infectious Diseases. And this is very much a result of a federal funding call that was released last year to establish 3 to 5 such hubs, research hubs across Canada that will increase capacity in pandemic preparedness and biomanufacturing. So I won't talk about this obviously in detail right now, but yes, right now I'm at U of T. This is also a position at U of T, however, in the Faculty of Medicine. That's the hub is administered by Faculty of Medicine. But again, it's a very, very big hub with about 90 partners on the hub right now. And my credentials, again, very much an academic sort of path with PhD from immunology and also developmental biology, because I was part of the comparative developmental biology program that was run through Mount Sinai from the University of Toronto. So, as you can see, so to be honest, I was always on the, on the academic path, but also very much kind of embedded a little bit with industry from very early on. So even after my master's in Guelph, I worked at the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization in Saskatoon for a couple of years. And that was really on trying to come up with some innovative ways to generate vaccines. And at the time, VIDO was really the most federally funded institute of all time in Canada. So it was a fantastic time to be there. And now I'm excited because I actually will get to work with the leaders at VIDO on the HI Cube. So it's fantastic. So then I did my PhD, and even during my PhD, I did take 2 years of, and I put mat leave in quotes because it was not really a mat leave. And I can talk about offline that I did something that I would not do again. which is trying to raise a child, but also coming into the lab in the evenings and nights and on the weekends and on every holiday. So yeah, definitely not something I would advise anyone to do. And then I did a postdoc, and not a very long one, at Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia, and came back to Canada kind of, to be honest, really not really knowing what to do, because I knew that the academic path was, it's going to be a tough slog, and I wasn't really guaranteed, even if you had a Nature Cell Science paper, that you're going to get an academic position. And so I started thinking about what else I could do with my life, and kind of really serendipitously landed as a research partnership officer at Sunnybrook Research Institute at the time, filling in on a friend of mine's mat leave position, and got really ingrained and gained a lot of knowledge on how to manage and apply for a lot of these infrastructure grants, such as CFI and Genome Canada, and so forth, or REPS, and how to really build those commercialization pieces that the PIs are asked to do, but really kind of don't know how to do, and find some industry match partners on those grants. And that expertise kind of actually really kind of launched me into the next position, which came like 9 months after, where I was a manager of technology sourcing and evaluation at CCRM for almost 4 years. And again, really sort of building that pipeline of innovation coming into CCRM, building companies within CCRM with academic founders, and really building the whole program from ground up. It was absolutely amazing. The first company that we created and spun out, which was Notch Therapeutics, and always to this day, this team is still actively looking on spinning out similar companies in the regen med space. When I was in that role, again, because very small team with a big mandate, I got pulled into a lot of other activities. So I got to work very closely with an investment team. I got to work very closely with the C-suite. Even sort of before I left for my current job, I was pulled in by Mike May, the CEO, and Mitch, who was the COO, to work on sort of understanding of the market in the regen med space, and how some of the existing projects and what kind of other projects could be sort of brought into Omnia Bio, which is the CDMO that CCRM spun out and is located in Hamilton. So really got that great understanding of, very high level organizational strategy and operations building from them. And one of the key things that I did really also got at CCRM was a huge network coming out. And that was the network that I could really actively engage with in my role as a partnerships officer at U of T. So with that role, that role really led me to expanding my network. I don't even know how many times, so you can imagine, because of the fact that I learned very quickly, if you have a U of T logo behind you, that opens every door. And so everyone wants to talk to you. So being sort of in a role where I was sort of building these new consortia, big consortia with industry, that was very, very helpful. So the other activities that I also engage with, I have kind of two hats at U of T. So one of the other hats is I am the member of the Blue Door Steering Committee, and that means that I am a captain designated lead on some of the engagements with multinational companies and bringing a lot of dollars on multi-million-dollar sort of partnership in R&D commitments. And I'm also a member of the core partnership committee that the university struck up. I'm also the advisor to the board for the Urban Robotics Foundation, because I also work very closely with Robotics Institute here on establishing a consortium in autonomous vehicle space. I've been a mentor with LSCDCS and also advisor for Toronto Global and Centis Health sort of led initiative on figuring out how to increase wet lab space capacity in GTA. So quickly roll at glance. So again, typical background for my role. I think actually MSc was the highest, but obviously someone with some business development skills. Project, definitely echo Jodi again. Project management is key, and really key, especially if you really work on strategy development and implementation. Potential salary range, I believe it's 90 to 120K, might be a bit higher right now. I think they have upgraded the role actually as I'm leaving. And what I do is I really do develop these very strategic industry partnerships and build consortia for specifically for those multi and interdisciplinary ISIs that we have, institutional strategic initiatives across all sectors. And those are acting to accelerate the innovation, technology development, and really sort of commercialization, eventually market adoption. Key skills, again, business development, really the ability to identify market opportunities is key. Being able to pitch to industry is one thing, because you always, and you want to find alignment very quickly. So I pride myself on getting to alignment in that very first meeting. And also ability, which is actually a kind of a challenge, is pitching this back to academics, because that is another set of sort of challenges and stakeholders. Effective communication, definitely some grant writing ability, because a lot of the grants that we apply for are sort of external funding opportunities, like Strategic Innovation Fund and FedDevs and things like that, especially if you want to put up new infrastructure for some of these initiatives. And as I said, project management and other careers that I considered, as I said, definitely academic career, but also venture creation, and then a VC, so more of on the investment side of things. Typical activities, so ton of networking, as Jodi said, really a lot of networking. Network has been a fantastic best friend of mine, and everything I know and what I know is really through network. Very much external facing, but also a lot of internal engagement, so really being able to have deep collaborations within the UFT structure, because that really allows me to be able to navigate some of the bureaucratic elements of the university. Again, sort of developing models of partnerships and consortia, some of the implementation strategies, really being able to bring a lot of industry to the table, then we can negotiate what these deals are going to look like. Drafting agreements. This is something, again, that I learned at CCRM. Hosting workshops with industry, right? Identifying some of their needs, and then supporting any external funding applications. The reason why my role is important is because the UFT, as any other university, has really moved forward on establishing what we call the sustainability pieces for those big strategic initiatives going forward. And so one way to do it is to really have some very close partnerships with industry, and being able to build operations and solve some biggest challenges in a given sector together with the industry partners. Why I enjoy my role is because I just absolutely love building strategies. I have to tell you, it's a great puzzle piece. I love learning new things. So even though I come from very pure life science background, I have learned so much about, for example, autonomous vehicle space, about AI space, about climate and net zero strategies, things like that. Something that I don't think I'd be able to learn if I wasn't actually in this role. And with this, I have ability to meet a variety of different stakeholders and really sort of work towards creating this local and global impact. Challenges, as I said, getting buy-in from PIs on strategy, and also importance of industry partnerships. I think that's probably the most challenging piece. And then future trajectory. So I think, I think as I said, so I'm stepping into a new role, which is director of a hub that was a UFT hospital and other partner-led initiative, but really initiative that was very much led by our office on the application. Of course, other roles are, eventually director of strategy operations partnerships for any of the current or new ISIs that are being developed. Possible role in philanthropy and advancement, so some, fundraising opportunities. Outside of university, I would say any partnership and BD role, as well as anything on a commercialization front. Career planning advice. So I would say for this role, even though this does come with an MSc, I found that PhD is key. And the reason is because you really need to understand the science and technical aspects of the project, because you're talking to industry about some very key challenges, and you need to understand what those challenges are and how they can potentially be solved. So I feel like PhD really did equip me actually being able to just kind of immerse myself in a very new field and really quickly understand what that field looks like at some very, very detailed level. Again, understanding of the market, industry needs and challenges, very important. Strategy, process building, again, very important. Definitely, you know, expand your network. If you, whatever network you have right now, even if it's, you know, basically using Jodi and I right now as being one of the sort of doors to open a network, please do that. We're happy to do that. I'm speaking for Jodi right now. Work on the skills that you can apply in any sector. So again, this is what I say, that PhD actually gave me ability to do that. I think that was fantastic, because technically what you're doing is you're really planning your projects and constantly trying to problem solve, you know, to get to where you want to be. Learn how to pitch, negotiate, and close deals. So this is something that I was told by my friends who are CEOs, that even if you do an MBA, you're not going to learn that. You're going to have to learn it, you know, on the ground. So being able to kind of be involved in these kind of conversations and activities is key. And I would say always be positive and collaborative. I think that is literally, when I say everyone has a reputation in this ecosystem, I hope that that is my reputation every time. One of the things that I think, you know, kind of following on from Jodi saying, and this is, you know, we don't really have time, but any kind of career advice I can give you is, and we can take this offline if anyone's interested, and I've done this for LSCDS, is how to really go about preparing, applying for jobs, but also preparing and nailing your job interviews. And I think, again, this echoes what Jodi was saying very well, is that don't feel that you are necessarily underqualified, because it's really all about how you present yourself and your skills. And big takeaway is, how are you actually going to solve the problem for the company in a nutshell? So that's really something you have to tell them in a cover letter and then expand on in an interview. And always negotiate a salary, which is also apparently what women especially don't do. General career advice, and this would be outside of, you know, very academia minded setting, is do not be afraid to try something new, no matter how challenging. So when I started my job at CCRM, I was told, please draft a strategic plan for technology sourcing and implementation for the company creation business unit. And I was just, yep, okay, yep, this is what I'm going to have to do, right? So, you know, of course, the way I went about it is I kind of partitioned this into different objectives that I had to accomplish before I was going to draft such a document, but I was definitely thrown into some deep waters. But I also learned so much through that process. Remember, and Jodi reminded me about this actually, you're not committed to the job. So the way that you're committed to your grad work. So if you try something and you think this is not for you, you can leave and you can try another opportunity. And definitely, I would say with that in mind, establish a timeline and criteria for your stay or leave decision early on, so that you don't actually waste time. You're not there for 2 years trying to make something work where you're, you know, absolutely convinced that this is not a job for you. And I think that's all I have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Patrycja, for your insightful talk and for walking us through your experience. And I'd like to thank both of you for sharing your stories with the group today.